Great. So I will now move on to the first session. I think we have a video from Katarina Ivanković. Katarina is Director of Social Affairs at the European Commission. So one of the main people in Brussels focusing on social policies around the EU, and she will say a few words now. Thank you.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear all, let me start by thanking you for the invitation to take part in this important conference on the family-centered early childhood intervention. I'm very sorry that I could not be with you today in person in beautiful Tirana. I hope the weather is nice, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to address you with this message. I would also like to say a few words on our policy at EU level and on our funding instruments to advance the early childhood intervention services in support of the inclusion of children with disabilities and their families. As you know very much, this is an important topic for Europe of equality and for Europe that, as we often like to say, leaves no one behind. It is reflected throughout the European Pillar of Social Rights. And in particular, let me draw your attention to the Pillar Principle 11 on early childhood education and care, to Pillar Principle 17 on inclusion of persons with disabilities, and Principle 18 on long-term care, as well as a very important document at the EU level, which is the EU Strategy for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This strategy, we like to say, is our tool to improve the lives of persons with disabilities in the EU. It is our roadmap to 2030 to ensure that all children and adults with disabilities can really fully and equally enjoy the rights and participate in all areas of life throughout their lives. A key aspect to this is the right to independent living. And the strategy recalls the support that children with disabilities and families need, in particular when it comes to preventing institutionalization and accessing the social protection. The family-centered approach and to early childhood intervention systems, which is promoted in this conference, placing families and their needs in the center of the support, is in line with the calls from the strategy for the rights of the persons with disabilities to strengthen the transition from institutional care to community and family-based care services for persons with disabilities, including children with disabilities, mainstream support services, as well as education, housing, healthcare. They need to be inclusive and accessible for children with disabilities and their families. As a flagship initiative of the strategy, the Commission is going to issue a guidance to member states on how to achieve improvements on independent living and inclusion in the community and to advance the institutionalization processes of persons with disabilities, including children, of course. Early childhood intervention services are really seen as a key to prevent the institutionalization of children with disabilities and to ensure their inclusion later in life. Developing the conditions for independent living and progressive closing down of institutional settings are processes that need investments. EU funds can play a crucial role in achieving these objectives, and EU funds have been playing a crucial role in achieving these objectives, I would dare to say, for at least more than one decade, if not already from 2010 and 11 when UNCRPD Convention was adopted. Promoting the institutionalization remains a priority for the Cohesion Fund in 2021-2027, and it is supported by enabling conditions for funding which is set out in the Commission Provision Regulation. Next to the shared management funds and structural funds, the technical support instrument, so-called TSI, can provide a targeted support for reforms of social services and the long-term care systems. Member states can also plan relevant measures in their, and are planning relevant measures in their recovery and resilience plans. Last, let me remind you on one very important initiative that is relevant for children with disabilities. It is the European Child Guarantee Recommendation. This recommendation puts children with disabilities in the heart of its activities and the actions. The EU pilot program that was run by UNICEF demonstrated that early childhood intervention services works and are beneficial for the children and for the families, and actually for the entire communities when it comes to the inclusion of children with disabilities in the society. The European Child Guarantee also asks for free and effective access to early childhood education and care, education, healthy meal per day, and also to health. These are all relevant for children with disabilities as well. And we also ask for effective access to nutrition and to housing. Also, I believe all of us agree that these are one of the most important aspects of inclusion of children with disabilities in the community. With this, I would like to conclude, and I wish you very fruitful discussion. And I can assure you that my colleagues and I are fully committed to working towards, with the member states, with the stakeholders and the international partners, on our common interest in improving the lives of children with disabilities and their families across Europe and across the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katarina. So Katarina also apologizes for not being able to be here today, but she is really a key ally for us on all these topics around deinstitutionalization, EU funds moving forward. So really making progress. She mentioned quite a few policies in a short space of time. So I might, before moving on, break down a few of them for you. So first of all, she talked about the European Pillar of Social Rights. The European Pillar of Social Rights is in some ways the overarching social policy agenda of the EU. And it outlines 20 principles in different areas of the social welfare systems. And it basically acts as a compass for the development of national policies in these areas. So for example, around the inclusion of persons with disabilities, around access to child care, for example, all these areas. It's the EU strategic overarching compass for how each member state should develop their own policies. So the European Pillar of Social Rights is not a binding instrument, it's a soft instrument, but still it's really the compass for how things are moving forward in the future, and I invite you all to look at it. By the end of this year, the EU will also be launching guidance to member states on deinstitutionalization. And so we're very much looking forward to that paper. Of course, we're actively working on it, and we will have to see if ECI is mentioned in that regard. If you have contact with the Commission, make sure that as soon as possible you speak to them about the importance of ECI. We need to make sure that in this guidance we have a strong ECI agenda too. And then she talked also about different funding instruments. When she talked about cohesion funds, for most of you, that's known as the European Social Fund, the European Regional Development Fund, and so forth, which invest a lot of money into social inclusion measures too. So again, quite a lot of funding opportunities to fund ECI there. Two other instruments she mentioned, we will talk about it a little later. I just wanted to give you a bit of an introduction to some of these policies because I'm not sure all of you are aware of them. Great, let's move now to a second speaker, Katrin Langensiepen, who's member of the European Parliament. She's not only a member of the European Parliament, she's also the chair of the Disability Intergroup. So in the Parliament, there's an intergroup that focuses on disability rights issues, and she is the chair of that group amongst a few other MEPs too. So a very influential person when it comes to disability rights at European level. She couldn't make it here today. I think she's going to New York next week. So she also has some private matters to deal with too. But we have a video from her. So if we can launch it, thank you.
Dear Thomas Bignal, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Unfortunately, I cannot be with you in person. However, I would like to take the opportunity to share a few words with you via this channel. Family-centered early childhood intervention is key if we want to make progress towards an inclusive society. I've been fortunate on several occasions. My parents took great care of my health and me from the moment I was born. They also lived in Germany. Admittedly, at the time, public support was far removed by any stretch of the imagination from our current idea of providing family-centered permanent support close to home. But nevertheless, there were support networks. So why is it so important to intervene early? Research shows that the first years of a child's life are crucial for their future development. At this crucial stage, we can build fundamental skills and abilities that lay the foundation for the rest of life. If we intervene early, we can identify and address potential problems before they develop into major challenges. And for this, we need parents and families. Parents and families are the most important supporters and advocates for their children. By involving them in the process and providing them with the support they need, we can increase the positive impact of early intervention. The needs and wishes of families must be central. Individualized, accessible support for children with disabilities is the most important foundation for a future independent life. The EU must actively fund it, because unfortunately, it is still far too rare in the EU member states. And during The Future is Accessible tours, I met families, especially mothers, so women from Poland or Hungary, Budapest, who would dream of such support. The promise of an ECI is a great one, but we must deliver on that now. On this panel, you talk about how they can use already existing policy and financial instruments to make ECI a reality across Europe. Let me start briefly with the policy instruments. We decided as a parliament at the end of last year that we would have an accessible EU center. There are all best practice examples from all member states will be collected, significantly evaluated, and of course, further developed. And most importantly, the information should be disseminated to all member states. This will only work if there are corresponding mirror centers in the member states. By this, I mean that we need to shift up a gear politically when it comes to making the available information about accessibility, deinstitutionalization, individual support, and housing options known everywhere. This must be the political will. This must be organized. And now we have it on the road. Secondly, the Commission is responsible for reviewing and evaluating. Secondly, the Commission is responsible for reviewing and evaluating the implementation of ECI. It can assess the various ECI providers, identify challenges or problems, and suggest necessary reforms or improvements. This includes monitoring the process of ECI, analyzing its impact, and making recommendations for an accessible and efficient system. And of course, we need to talk about money. Parliament plays an important role in the allocation of EU funds. It has the power to influence budgetary decisions and to ensure that adequate funding is provided for the ECI and the related community-based quality services. This must be stated in the fund's guidelines in the same way as we have defined in the EU strategy for persons with disabilities. Furthermore, EU organizations can use its platform to raise awareness and promote the importance of ECI. It can organize debates, hearings, and public consultations. At this point, I thank you all for being here and continuing to work on this very important issue. You have just discussed it for 2 days. Our EASPD position paper identifies other key points that we must finally bring into implementation. And above all, we have to keep in touch with our fellow human beings, but of course also with the stakeholders, and encourage them to participate in the ECI process. EASPD, UNICEF, and many other committed persons here in the room are already doing a damn good job today. This interdisciplinarity is exemplary. For this and for our tireless commitment, I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. Some, I think, important words there from Katrin Langensiepen, who's a real ally in Brussels around ECI. There aren't many who actually know a fair bit about ECI in Brussels, unfortunately. That's something to change, but hopefully with people like Katrin, we can really make a difference there. And actually, I spoke to her last week, and she was really very disappointed she couldn't be with us here today. Again, she does a lot of traveling, and she can't be everywhere at once, but we will make sure we will continue to work with her on the ECI agenda. Now let's move on to, let's say, in some ways, the practical implementation of some of the policies that have been mentioned today. We will start with the situation in Croatia. The child guarantee is this quite significant EU policy around children's rights and access to different types of services. And the Croatian ministry has been very active around this area. Can you tell us a bit about how the Croatian authorities are implementing the child guarantee, specifically in the area of ECI?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much, Tom. Dear organizers and dear participants, first, we would like, my colleague and I would like to say that we are very glad to be here. We are very appreciating the idea of giving us the opportunity what has been achieved in Croatia after 3 phases of the pilot project of child guarantee was implemented in our country, and how did we get to the drafting of the national action plan related to the child guarantee. So today we will talk more about politics and policy approach, which is very difficult, and thank God we are the last one here, because it's very difficult after 2 days of these emotional and inspirational stories that we heard from the practice to talk about this policy issue. But I promise we will not take a long time of yours, and really just to get to know about the results that were achieved in our country. First, I would like to say how did we approach in drafting this national action plan. And of course, the main approach was the well-being of children, of every child particularly. And as you can see, the well-being of children is in the focus of all activities, and they are a shared responsibility of ours. And that's how we see when we approach in designing measures that are directed towards children's well-being. As Ms. Katarina Ivanković Knežević, who was our colleague in the ministry, mentioned, we are, through the child guarantee, we are actually guaranteeing to children 6 goals. I will not go into details, of course, through all of them, but just to share with you that these are free early childhood education and care, and they are also very related to ECI. Free education for everyone, and we already, even before the national action plan is implemented by the government, we already now have the measure that was free meal for every child that's living in the poverty or in the social exclusion. We have this measure for all children in the primary school education to have a free meal per day. So we already start to implement even before the document is nationally approved. Free healthcare, healthy nutrition, adequate housing, and improved availability of social services, which are very important for early childhood intervention measures in this early childhood intervention. Today, I will mention just few numbers, but before I'll go through them, I would like to just remind all of you that Croatia has 4 million citizens. Today, we will talk about the results, numbers achieved in only one county. In Croatia, there are 21 counties, and the pilot project was implemented. 3 phases of pilot projects were implemented in Međimurje County. It is a county with around 100,000 inhabitants. So when we talk about numbers, please take this in consideration, because it's very important to put a relation of the numbers achieved, the results achieved in relation to the total number of inhabitants. So in Croatia, there is approximately a very similar percentage of children at risk of poverty and social exclusion, which is 21.3%. The well-being of, groups of children at risk in Croatia, we targeted children based on the situation in Croatia. Every country has the liberty, of course, to target children as according to the needs of children in every country. We did this kind of division. And of course, since the National Action Plan started to be developed before the aggression started in Ukraine, we added also as a target group children displaced from Ukraine. Of course, in the beginning, I would like to thank, I think on behalf of all of us in the ministry, to the partnership of EU and UNICEF to support the development of this National Action Plan that has the goal, and that's very important, and that's how we see this being very important, is this is a multi-sectoral approach to all services. That's very important when we talk especially about ESI. Phases of child guarantees pilot projects are development of strategies for access to most vulnerable children, and we saw which groups of most vulnerable children we have. Collection of information that was I don't know, it's a result of some research that collection of data, collection of information is very important when we approach towards the policy making, because we have to know, as I mentioned in the beginning, how many inhabitants we talk about now. These results, that's how we want to know about the numbers, concrete numbers, and how to develop policies that are responsible to these numbers. And of course, in-depth analysis that UNICEF also built for us, and that really helped a lot to the development of National Action Plan. 3 components of the project, of these 3 phases project, was child protection services and family support, early preschool education, and early intervention services for children with developmental disabilities. So it showed very important in this county. So that's how the domino effect is going to be transferable to the whole country at the national level. Why did we choose Međimurje County? Because we have very high concentration based on the total number of inhabitants in this county of children and families at risk. So we have 38.7% of total Roma population in the Republic of Croatia living in this county, and Roma children make about 25% of children living in poverty. So very big concentration of children living in poverty in this county. And also very important it is to stress that 2.6 of total inhabitants receive guaranteed minimum benefit and live in extreme poverty in this county. So results that were achieved in this Međimurje County is this data collection. What we said, it's very important that we know how to collect data, that the process of data collecting is going to be transferred to the national level. Then improved coordination and integration of ESI and ECD services, which with enhanced accessibility of ECI services. We have accomplished 1,093 young children and 917 caregivers that were directly reached through these phases of pilot project. intensive support to 358 young children and 363 caregivers, 448 services and counseling sessions have been provided to children and parents or caregivers. The guideline was drafted, and of course 190 professionals in education, social welfare, healthcare, and other relevant services were having their improved skills and knowledge for their better approach to the ESI, to the children in need.
You have 2 minutes.
Yes, I know. We also constructed and established 5 resources centers, and of course activated local self-government units to participate in the process of establishing resources centers. This is how it looks, but you will get the presentation, so I will not go into detail. What are our key challenges now after we saw what results we have achieved in this county, and what are key challenges on the national level? So it is continuous work on improvement of this interdepartmental cooperation, which we stress all the time especially during the drafting the National Action Plan, monitoring and evaluation system. We heard a lot about that during these 2 days, and removing, of course, all obstacles that we see in the implementation. We have national plans, which are strategic documents that are basis for this National Action Plan of the Child Guarantee. And the specific goals, what we have in our Child Guarantee, correspond to the instructions we have in the European Union, Council of the European Union recommendation. And those are, as I mentioned in the beginning, early and preschool. So I won't go into more detail, not to steal your time, but they actually correspond to these recommendations we have. And at the end, what I try to stress based on the time we have here, it is very important to say that we have this accent on the integrated services in the community, which corresponds to the interdepartmental cooperation. We have local community, police, social welfare, education system, health system, civil society, of course, work and employment offices, and justice system to be united in helping children, and to get back on the beginning of my presentation to work for the well-being of every child. So thank you very much for your attention, and looking forward to spend the rest of our time here with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's, I think, very impressive and very interesting for me, stuck in Brussels, often working on these EU frameworks and seeing actually how they're being integrated into national action plans. Is really important to see that we actually have an impact on our job as well. So also. Can we share the slides with participants afterwards? Fantastic, thank you. I'm also aware that we have a representative from the Bulgarian authorities. Could you pass the microphone maybe to her, or my microphone? Thanks, Tim, for being so quick. So what's happening in Bulgaria right now?
Yes, I can share quickly. And my name is Snežana Radeva, and I'm the Early Childhood Development Officer in UNICEF in Bulgaria, one of the countries which was selected also to implement this phase of EU Child Guarantee. And our approach was really not to focus to establish something new as a big model, but really to try to build on what is available, and to strengthen the elements, and to try to really connect them. The EU Child Guarantee in Bulgaria, we focus on 4 models: universal home visiting model, early childhood interventions, inclusive education, and strengthening the capacity of social services through establishing mobile outreach services in the community. We implement we actively worked with 10 municipalities in 3 regions of the country, And actually in 3 of them, we really try to develop systematic approach to early childhood intervention. I can share that we provide training and support to the primary healthcare providers to implement systematic early identification of developmental difficulties, really strengthen the capacities of the practitioners to provide evidence-based early childhood intervention with the support of Early Aid, Katrin, and many other practitioners. And what was the new elements was really to try to connect the different services and systems, and we established on national level, local level, and regional level consultative bodies or council that and this council was consist of experts and also key representatives and stakeholders from the community, and which was really a key. And I'm saying it because it was a really changing time for Bulgaria. During the implementation of EU Child Guarantee, we changed 6 governments. 4 of them was caretaker governments. So it was really key to try to focus on local level and regional level and to have the commitment of the national stakeholders.
Thank you.
To continue the implementation. We reached more than 300 families in ECI directly. More than 90,000 families were benefited from the implementation of EU Child Guarantee in the country. In terms of sustainability, all of the elements, including ECI and the activities that I mentioned as part of the ECI are written in the national plan for implementation of the EU Child Guarantee. In the National Recovery and Resilience Plan, we also put ECI as system approach, so we will work on it in the next months. And we also worked very closely with universities in the country to develop, to strengthen, to have this component sustainable for the capacity strengthening of the ECI practitioners. So we are almost finalizing the pre-service and e-service training for ECI staff. This was in brief.
Thank you very much to my colleague over there. Thank you very much. I think two great examples of how national authorities are really taking the lead on implementing the child guarantee in their own countries, and hopefully also inspiration for other countries to do the same moving forward. We can see how impactful and successful it is. You also mentioned the Recovery and Resilience Facility. So for those who don't know, it's the big EU COVID recovery fund, which is basically quite a significant amount of money, which is going to the different EU countries to be invested on recovering from COVID, but also supporting reforms in different areas. So great to see another EU instrument, the Recovery and Resilience Facility, going to facilitating ECI too. I think we will move now on to another topic, another EU policy, which is the Commission's Technical Support Instrument. We heard a bit about it this morning, but for those who weren't here, maybe we can go into a bit more depth. Dorina, please introduce to us a bit the Technical Support Instrument and the project in Greece. Thank you.
Oh, there, yeah, there it is. Great. So good afternoon, everyone. It's different standing here. Thank you, first of all, as well, again, for the invitation to speak at this very important conference on family-centered ECI that brought together all these stakeholders from the international community to discuss about this topic, and I'm very glad to be part, and I have learned a lot during the last 2 days. Now we go, after exactly all these presentations that were, went from heartfelt to, really information from what's happening on the ground. We're going to talk about something a bit more mundane from the side of the European Commission, funding. Let me see if yeah, okay. So basically, yes, so as you heard, I represent the European Commission, a fairly new Directorate General, which is called Directorate General for Structural Reform Support, in short, DG Reform. And I've been asked to present basically our funding instrument, which is the TSI, the Technical Support Instrument. As these, I suppose, are very new words to you, let me just explain a bit what they are and place them in a context. Some of you who were here this morning to hear about the what we call in short the ECI Greece project, you've heard already a preview of this. So this is to go a bit more in depth. So DG Reform is actually offering and funding technical support and expertise for the design and implementation of structural growth enhancing and inclusive reforms in all EU member states. You'll see a couple of information that are kind of the more crucial, the fact that it is for member states. You see the available budget and the fact that we now have over 1,000 projects in all EU member states, that we can actually support reforms in any phase of the kind of cycle of the reform, so from its inception, design, implementation, and also evaluation. It will be tailor-made it will be, upon the request of a member state, and it will be tailor-made to the needs of that member state. And there's no co-financing requirement as we have, for example, for structural funds like the ESF. Just to say that, we cover all reform areas. So, from governance, public administration, digital transformation, and then more specifically, the unit I represent. So under its remit, we have the reform areas relevant to the labor market, social policy, education, and health. And of course, then that's where the early childhood intervention would fall under. So now, how does this work actually, the technical support instrument? We have annual cycles, and there are 3 phases. So member states are requested, yes, to submit project proposals every year by the 31st of October. And then at the second phase, when we get these project proposals, they are assessed by us by multiple criteria, in terms of their maturity and the commitment of, the member state and the governments to actually deliver on them. And after the selection process is done, then in the beginning of the following year, we actually we provide them the technical support. And this can be done in various ways. It can either be done directly, so either through us, if there is the necessary and the relevant expertise, or in collaboration with other directors generals of the Commission, or indirectly through a contract, let's say, with the international organizations, member state experts, private sector experts, NGOs. So we have different formats. And the particularity of DG Reform is that we actually, we are involved in the entire duration of the project. So we are actually following very closely its implementation on the ground. Oh, well, sorry, I didn't realize that we can see everything on the screen. But anyway, this is just to show that member states can request support for reforms that are of their own initiative, or that are linked to the policy areas of the DG of the European Union, and also in order to be able to better use and more have targeted use of other EU funds, like we've heard before, the ESF or the Recovery and Resilience Fund. Because we're a very small DG, we're actually only 250 people, I think, overall, yes. And we've had a lot of requests. We have to somehow streamline, demand because of course we do not have the capacity or the budget to be able to, to undertake more. So in order to streamline that, we have created lately what we call flagship projects and multi-country projects. So flagships are, every year we kind of decide on some thematic areas that are more in line than, that would promote EU policy. So for example, last year we had the European Child Guarantee as a flagship project. And also we have multi-country projects. So this is something where we would have, like an overall umbrella contract that would cover several countries that are undertaking the, a reform on the same policy area. And then, we would tailor-made it, adapted to the needs, meaning that there might be a horizontal component in a project where, that would be relevant to all member states, and then there would be exchanges between them. And then there would be a second component where we would look at, the individual needs of every country depending on where they are in the reform. So just to, go back to specifically to the family-centered early childhood intervention. We've heard, so I don't want to go into details, that it's fully in line with a policy context at EU level. We've heard it from DG Employment Director. We've heard it as well from Croatia, the European Pillar of Social. And no, Thomas actually, who explained a bit explained it very well. So I will not go into details. The European Pillar of Social Rights, the Council recommendation of the Child Guarantee, and of course the European Strategy for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And so just to give you an example then of the types of technical support that can be requested, for example, and how we could support the transition to this new model of ECI. It can be to help member states with legislative and policy reforms, the frameworks, on the services, on improving maybe quality, and so developing, for example, relevant mechanisms and tools, and also designing training programs for capacity building, in order to support stakeholder engagement and consultation, or pilot testing. And actually, for those who actually were in this morning on the presentation of the Greek project, I think most of them are actually part of the Greek project. Just to say that it is very important then, to understand the logic, because we're trying, the TSI, it has a specific amount and it's the expertise, but then the important thing is also, always to be able to combine it, with the kind of larger funds like the ESF or the RRF. And just to give you an example, we've heard that UNICEF was involved through funding from ESF on preparing the Child Guarantee, so that member states would develop their own national action plans. And now we come in with the TSI to help specific member states upon their requests for the monitoring and implementation. For example, a very hot topic is the issue of data, as we heard as well from Croatia. We have a similar project in Greece. How do you collect data? How do you establish, data that are really showing you where are the children in need, and not only in economic terms? So, and finally, yes, there is, a slide showing a bit the timetable, as I explained before, this annual cycle. You can see it in more detail when you will get the presentations. And that's it for me. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dorina. Yeah, thank you. The project that we've heard a lot about, the project in Greece, the TSI project in Greece, ECI Greece. Effectively, we're talking about a project where the Greek government asked for technical support from the European Commission to develop reform in early childhood intervention, and in terms of getting the expertise to be able to deliver on that reform, they requested EASPD to support the process of implementing the project. So that's how it works. A national authority asks for support for reform to the European Commission, and then through that process, they identify, either they provide the support themselves or they identify a stakeholder who can put that in place. So that's the project that we're doing in Greece. Are there any questions for Dorina around the technical support instrument? There's a question here at the front, if we can.
Thank you very much. Dorina, is there any room for non-EU member states? And a little bit.
Yes, understandable. As I said, we're kind of a new DG. So up to now, the legal framework that allows the TSI to use the TSI, it only refers to EU member states. But we are in discussions with the relevant Directorate General, DG NEAR, in short, on how we could actually expand it to accession countries. I know that has been a very kind of under the radar pilot phase with very specific projects now ongoing, but there is an idea of how to extend it, but it would, have to be formally done and through, the legal framework allowing it. So as soon as this is done, of course, we will inform you all.
And also on the side of EASPD, there's one message that I've got from this conference, besides the fact that ECI is great, is how can we make more funding opportunities for countries outside of the EU who also have the same needs, if not even more significant needs. So EASPD will be working on that in the years to come for sure. Any other questions for Dorina? Nope. Okay, now let's move. We've sort of covered the EU policies side dimension to it. And now we can move on to what next? How can we move forward on this agenda? Again, we've understood that ECI works. We know how to put in place ECI, but still there seems to be a barrier in terms of actually really making progress in this field. And that's what we should be discussing now. For EASPD, any sort of discussion around disability rights always starts from organizations of persons with disabilities first. We have Suela Lala, who is board member of the European Network for Independent Living, a very significant, a very influential European organization based in Brussels, I think. Suela, how can we as EASPD, but we as stakeholders, join forces with the disability rights movement to really make progress on ECI in Europe? What tips do you have for us, Suela?
Thank you, Thomas. As you mentioned, I'm Suela Lala. I'm a board member of the European Network on Independent Living, which is an organization that promotes independent living all across Europe. And I'm also an Albanian activist living here and running an organization and promoting mainly and most importantly, the right to accessibility for persons with disability in Albania. It's an honor to be here, and particularly because my Albanian colleagues also co-planned and co-organized this conference. So thank you for that. And it will be hard for me now to divide my Albanian activism with the annual work, so you will see me mention or mix them together. But I want to say that Enil, for example, views not only independent living as important for persons with disabilities, but also children for disabilities. So when you might think, oh, but doesn't independent living mean that we should live independently without support and, be independent? No, it means simply having the same choice and control over our lives, and that can be applied equally to children with disabilities, meaning having the same choice and control as their as other children at the same age. Talking in that sense, and it considers key to independent living the service of personal assistance. We consider personal assistance important for so many reasons. In Albania, personal assistance is provided from the age of 2, correct me, Emanuela? But as we all know, unfortunately, it's a minor sum of money provided mainly to the women, to the mothers who are being excluded from work and, overworking, taking care of families, children, and trying to support also the child with a disability. So I think it's important to work towards a proper and substantial provision of independent living also for persons with disabilities, so that they in turn can improve access to early childhood services and interventions. So I would like to stress that importance. And also during last year, we have been working on assistive technology for persons with disabilities. I don't know if you mentioned it during the conference, but we know that that's also a key element to support particularly children, where intervention with the right products and right assistive technology is key for their future development, and provision of the wrong devices can actually lead to, or no devices, no assistive devices can lead to substantial damage for their growth and their future. So I would like to stress these 2 points, and as important and as also quite problematic in my country, but I suppose also in quite some other countries. I know, for example, that in terms of assistive technology, the European Union is working on a project to regulate it also at an EU level, which is currently not regulated. While your question in relation to making the early childhood intervention part of the disability rights movement, I don't see a difference there. You know, I don't see it why it shouldn't be. You know, it's part of a better life, a more dignified life, and an independent life, as previous speakers mentioned. So it's part of our fight for the right to independent living for all persons with disabilities, including children. Thank you.
Thank you, Suela. Two key elements which at least in where I've been in the conference have actually been maybe under discussed in some ways is the complementarity between ECI and personal budgets and personal assistance, as well as ECI and assistive technology. Take that as a message also for EASPD moving forward, is to better explore those synergies as well, to make sure that we're working all together on these in these areas. Emily, we've heard a lot the last few days. You've just heard a lot about EU social policies also, probably a bit confusing maybe for the United States. But I was just wondering if you had any, is there a miracle solution for bringing this ECI agenda forward, or is it complex? How can we make progress?
Everything that's complex must be made easy to understand and communicated well. So yes, it's complex, but I think that we can do it. I would like to say just a word about child agency. It's very important to realize that from the earliest moments, a child is making decisions if the parents recognize it, and that it is possible to consult a child and include a child in the family. In my own family, we had what was called the family council, and I did that with my children, and they were helping to make family decisions from the earliest age. And children with disabilities are no different. They can help to make decisions too, just to comment on child agency. The conference has been exciting and fascinating and wonderful and deeply distressing and uplifting. It's been all of those things at once. And I was struck by the beauty of the partnership between EASPD and UNICEF. This is a major step forward, and you are creating it by being here and making it possible. The second thing was the wonderful part of the conference devoted to the European Union leadership around the child guarantee and ECI within it. And this provides the three approaches, in a sense, provide the leitmotif for what is moving forward. So congratulations to all who have been a part of these decisions in making this possible. It's, I think, extremely important to realize that we need not only individual country to country support within the EU, but also we need to have the non-EU states that was just mentioned. I want to emphasize how important it is. Many countries who which will be soon, I'm sure, members of the EU would like to be a part of this effort. And ECI does not see boundaries. It doesn't see limitations. So I think we have to open up and create the bridges to make it possible for all countries in the European region. And I do mean the West and the East and the near Asia countries as well. Let's embrace all countries to work together. So I'm going to advocate for a pan-European approach. Think of it that way, reaching out to as far east as we can go, and also south, north, and to the west. In this effort, I see a major need to look at certain strategic priorities. And there are so many priorities that have arisen in the meeting, but there are some that I would like to address specifically. One of them is that at the time of the Russian incursion into the Ukraine, many of us went to work immediately to contact every ECI program that existed in the various countries to prepare to receive the people coming in from the Ukraine. And it was painfully evident that we lacked a structure of any sort of information, of networking, of communications to be able to receive the people well. Thanks to the goodness of the people from Poland to Moldova, Bulgaria to Romania, there has been a welcoming of people all throughout the Balkans. You find families. This has been enormously gratifying, but we should do better in the future, and we can build on this harsh experience to have a full landscape study of ECI capacity in the entire region. So I think that we should think in terms of a landscape study, and there are various elements, I won't go into them now, that should go into that, but one of them is a thorough mapping of all of the different groups that are working and that could work together further. And groups, really NGOs as well as state institutions, who could at this time begin to build their capacity to be able to offer more services to their own people within their countries and to the people who have come into their countries. So to me, that is a very major effort that is needed immediately. The second would be on the policy level. We're seeing emerging policies. This is exciting and wonderful. I congratulate each of the countries who are moving forward. I think and I say who because it's people who make policy. And so people as they're in their roles as leaders, and not only in political positions, but as thought leaders in their country, I think should be in a type of collaboration where we can have a pan-European approach to sharing what we're learning. There are lessons being learned. I taught a whole bunch of them, and I think we need to capture those lessons in real time and communicate them to one another. And as each country is moving forward, learn from the others. There are some things we've already learned, we know about, but not necessarily are they entirely understood across all the countries. So I think that that's really urgently needed. Another area that has come up in a very major way is training. We have at this time different national systems of training and in ECI, and most of them are very weak, both at the pre and in-service level, and they are far from continuous. They should be continuous pre-service training so that we're constantly upgrading the capacity of our professors and others who are trainers to be able to continue training in the ECI area. In addition, there's in-service training. I learn every day. I spend tons of time reading the emerging research in the field. I think everybody else should too. So that means we all need to be a part of in-service training. It's our role. We must do that in order to be maximally useful. But it really means too another thing. When I hear about the barriers to being able to hire people in one's own country who come from the Ukraine, we have to be able to find a way to do this. So we need pan-European certification of two types of people for ECI. One is early intervention specialists who are trained thoroughly and to handle a series of therapies, but also are very knowledgeable about the guidelines and procedures of how we work, the methods, the core concepts, the eligibility issues, etc., in ECI. Secondly, they should be very beautifully trained to be able to prepare certified specialists who are not early intervention specialists. These are our therapists in all of the fields of therapy, and there are many in the region. They are psychologists, they're social workers, they're nurses, they're physicians. Some pediatricians are so wonderful, they want to be a part of it as well. And I think that if we had that certification, and it wasn't just a certification for Bulgaria or for North Macedonia, but it's a certification that's for the whole region, so that we're able to certify our people, and they will be accepted working anywhere within Europe. And that means also some of the non-accession countries, pre-accession countries, I should say. Then we would have something which would give us the flexibility to move people from point A to point B, depending upon the need, without the barriers. So just think about it. I know it's revolutionary, I'm sorry, but this is something that is clearly needed. When you see, if children can't be served, there's a problem, there's a barrier. So we need to bring about that training, and it has to be continuous, it has to be rich within the countries, but I think we should have the pan-European training and the pan-European certification. So it's a thought to think about and to consider. I think I have two more. One is on networks of support. I think a pan-European network of support of all major actors in ECI would be helpful. And that would include people like you, you have played a marvelous and wonderful role in so many countries, and you continue to give all that you have in the way of capacity to so many. This is something that we should do. Everybody should do. Everybody here should be helping each other out in every way they can. And you're already doing it. I see it informally, but we should have that formalized to some extent so that there's a movement of people at all times to meet the needs wherever they are. The final point that I want to make is on monitoring and evaluation. We have made major strides thanks to the SDGs in the identification of specialized indicators, and there are more indicators that are coming along that will pertain to the early childhood area. This is a time to begin thinking about planning for regional monitoring and evaluation, as well as national monitoring and evaluation. You encrust the two together and have a powerful engine for helping with planning and decision-making over time. So there would be feedback loops coming in to help prepare the next generation of policy planning that must be conducted, because these are cycles. They're like a spiral that keeps circling, and you keep coming back to more or less the same point, but it's not the same point. You've moved forward a bit in the cycle and you're going on, and you need the data to do it. Without the data, you cannot make the progress that you want. And combine that with universal child tracking systems within nations. This is truly national, but you can have accords for international transfer of data where it's needed. And then with all the privacy of the GRPD, all that's done, it's so excellent in Europe, better than any other region of the world with regard to the privacy of children and children's information, family information. So I feel that there is a need to link monitoring and evaluation to child tracking. And if we have all of the things that I mentioned, there are other things that are important, and I didn't mention that, but if we had these, we would have enough to really make a tremendous move forward. But it will only happen if everybody collaborates to do it.
Thank you very much, Emily. I think we all have our a lot of homework moving forward, and that's actually now I'm gonna ask Eric Blumkolk, who's the very involved with the ECI member forum, and therefore is very important in shaping EASPD's work in the future. after Emily and what she has just said, do we have a multi-annual ECI program for EASPD?
Well, actually, you just heard it. There's no need to repeat, but I was thinking, have you recorded Emily's speech, and then we can repeat it again, because I fully support what Emily just presented. And I was actually thinking about very, very similar topics. It seems to be that we are more often on the same page. Yes, I'm speaking here on behalf of the ECI member forum. I'm co-chair. I'm in a way also founding father. 6 years ago, I had this crazy idea that, hey, EASPD in that time was not paying attention to ECI. I thought that was very much needed. And from there, we came to here, to Albania, to Tirana, and this incredible conference, powerful conference. So I'm really very, very pleased with this this event. Yes, Emily said so many wise things. We indeed need on the European and pan-European level a real analysis of the situation of ECI in all the countries, because that will give the input and also for EU to formulate recommendations for ECI policies in the pan-European region, so that all countries will follow more or less the same path. Of course, every country has its own specificities, has its own specific problems, but also potentials. But the general idea should be the same, and the same regarding the training. Absolutely crucial. And within the ECI member forum, we also provide training peer-to-peer. And I like to take the opportunity, sorry for making a bit propaganda here, but to the audience here, that it would be really a great idea if you would join the ECI member forum of EASPD, so we can continue meeting each other. We have frequent online meetings. Emily is also a member of that forum. We exchange information, we exchange policies, advocacy strategies, but also very relevant trainings from one member to the other members. And we are organizing field visits as well. So please join the ECI member forum. We are already strong. You can see it in that this conference is now happening, but we can, of course, be stronger with your expertise, bringing that in. Also already mentioned several times, but I want to stress that it's very important that ECI will be integrated in all the relevant EU instruments. It's all first steps are taken, but as member forum, we definitely will continue to push that agenda. But and Emily also already mentioned it, but it's absolutely crucial to repeat that the importance that for the accessing countries and even the pre-accessing countries in the pan-European region would have more possibilities to get funding for the development of ECI, family-centered ECI systems in their countries. At the moment, for countries as Albania or Ukraine, it is, and Moldova, it is more difficult to get access to funds that are really bigger funds that are needed for the national systems. Now we are doing things very project-based, and they are good, and that's important because then, because of that, we can create good practices, and those good practices should be the basis of the national strategies. But yes, if in case, for example, Ukraine now will approve the new law on early childhood intervention, it will be a big burden for Ukraine's budget. So how is Ukraine going to finance the delivery of the ECI services in all the regions of Ukraine? So there, for example, it's a big challenge, but for that, we really need also big money to make that work. Important question of this, how to make it work? Well, sometimes when the policies are at stake, when the stakeholders are there, But when the money's not there, we still are very burdened because of that situation. So that's a very important message I would like to give in name of the ECI member forum. So yes, and Ukraine in general will be on our agenda. We will continue supporting the development of ECI in Ukraine, and this is what Ukraine absolutely needs. I have weekly meetings with Department of Social Policy of Zakarpattia region, and I asked them already a few times, but isn't this too much every week having a meeting? But they said no. Even when we have not a full agenda for our meeting, it's so important that we have this meeting because we feel supported. And in this sorry. Even. Okay. Sorry, you got the message. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Clear message there, indeed. We are closing very, very soon. I'm looking if you have a few more minutes. Not. Okay, are there any questions in the crowd? I know it's late, nearing the end, but this is now or never. There's a question here, I think. Yeah, Annick.
Hi, this is Annick Jensen from New Zealand. I'll ask again what I asked at the beginning of the conference. How important is it to have a pan-European group of families to support this work? Family leaders.
I think so.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for that question. And it's in a way, it's a declaration of intent to say, absolutely, not having family membership. It's like not consulting the beneficiary. It's absolutely essential to have family leadership. Furthermore, we have many parent associations in the countries throughout Europe, and they play formidable roles. They will, for example, be your best advocates. I always say the parents carry us on their shoulders. We hope for the policies, they need the policies, and they will talk to the parliamentarians, for example. Many a time we have gone with the parents to parliamentary discussions, and they carry the day. And then suddenly up pipes a senator and says, you know, I have a child with disabilities, and suddenly we have a new advocate. And it's just a question of being sure the parents are always a part of everything that we do. They want to be, and they should be.
May I add shortly on this? Yes, this is I fully support again what Emily was just mentioning, and I can underline it with the example we have in Ukraine, where we, from the beginning of the process, we have involved parents organizations. We even were able to develop a parents movement on ECI. Not all of the parents were beneficiaries of ECI, but they were parents of disabled children, and they understood that when they heard about ECI, that they really missed something fundamental in the first 3-4 years of the life of their baby with some kind of developmental problem or disability. And I'm convinced that the presence of the parents in all the debates we had on local level, on regional level, and on the national level, where parents also are members of the different councils, ECI councils, that really made a difference. And of course, indeed, ECI is about parents, empowering parents. So parents should have at least two roles, being the essential partners in the whole ECI service delivery, but also partners in the advocacy for ECI to become part of that ECI will become part of the national care system, and that it will be recognized and financed, et cetera, et cetera. So, yes.
If I could just, one little additional point on that. One of the things we've learned in participatory policy planning for early childhood development, as well as ECI throughout the world, is that with parent participation in consultation activities at every level, interfamily, community, provincial and national levels, we find that it is enriched. And finally, what happens is that the parents and the local community leaders take leadership in actually owning the policy and implementing the policy. I did a research study on countries where they had used participatory policy planning techniques. And we found out in all of them, not only did they implement their policies, they began implementation before the policies were formally adopted. And the reason was they are empowered in making part of the decisions. They said, we're going to do this, that my country's going to agree to this. I'm going to move now. So the answer is, how can we not include the parents?
Great. That's a clear, I think, message for EASPD2 is to work even closer to families. I know we have a representative from Families Europe over there, Kemi in the corner. So we obviously work very closely already, but maybe there's room to do even more together. Kemi, thank you. Quickly going to panelists, and then we'll come back to some questions. Dorina, you've heard quite a bit already. One element where I have a question for you is, once we do all these, for example, the ECI project in Greece, is that project shared with other national authorities afterwards? Is there like a peer-to-peer learning opportunity between member states about these reforms? Or is it just, funding the reform and there's no exchange between member states? Is there a process for that?
Thanks for your question, Thomas. No, we do not have something specific about particularly exchanging on a project with other member states. But of course, the idea, as we discussed a bit this morning, is to have a sustainable reform. Of course, we do not want to invest effort and money, without being able to, make sure that, a reform goes ahead. So, as I said, we're kind of, we're brainstorming internally on how to, how to ensure that in the future, because we don't have any safeguards right now. So, for example, in the new contracts that we're signing now with providers, for example, we foresee a follow-up report. So it would be, at the end of the project, a report that would really have a bit like a strategy, like the main takeaways from a project and, what the country would need to do going forward. So this would be in a way, a roadmap for the country in case, there's a change of government or officials. So, not to blame it that people are leaving and somehow the reform is lost. Also, we're making more and more, final deliverables, so final reports, let's say, of projects public, and they will be published on the DG Reform website, so that countries would be able to consult them. And of course, through us, because we're becoming more and more known, let's say, in government structures of member states. Of course, they can always come to us, and and on an ad hoc basis, we can share the information.
Thank you very much. Now, also a question for Melita. Do you have any comments about what's been discussed now? Okay, great. Then we have a question here, I think, in the middle. I think. Thank you, Cal. Daniela.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank all the organizers, and I want to share my deepest respect to your expertise, Miss Emily. It's like an fresh air, and always inspiring, and really proving and bringing us to the roots of this beautiful cause. We've been hearing a lot of examples and proofs why ECI, and probably we know the answer, but because most of us, especially we from Moldova, we still have this post-Soviet mentality, and we've been struggling for 20 years now to switch to biopsychosocial model and so on. And we still have this kind of question, but we have pediatricians in place, we have rehabilitation in place, we have everything. So what would your response be to these kind of people, which are still taking us back and not really believing in ECI. I would like a really strong message from your side for these kind of people back home. Thank you very much.
Who are you asking the question for?
Miss Emily in the first place, and maybe all of you.
Emily?
A very hard question. There's one thing about the old Soviet system. It fell because it was central. Central planning doesn't work. Ultimately, it always dies. And it's participatory planning that enables us to have long-lasting policies that will continue over time. If the people demand it over time, they will actually maintain it. So changing systems, though, can require many things. There are a lot of economic issues and who is in control. And the greatest problem, the greatest threat we have to children is authoritarian leaders. And in most countries, not all, but in most countries, they're ruled by authoritarian leaders. They do not invest in children. They do not pay attention to children. And we are seeing this lived out before our eyes right now with the incursion of the state of Russia. And I think that it's extremely important to guard the democratic approach and to engender it and support it over time in each of our countries, if for no other reason to preserve our children's well-being. Because with a democracy, one can have people who will listen in governments, sometimes not always the best decision makers, but they will listen and they will try to work for the children. Overcoming the past forms of planning is not easy, but when people live the experience of participatory policy planning, they become convinced. And once their behaviors change, I was saying this to somebody in the meeting, the attitudes begin to change over time. And once that the attitudes are well into place, we begin to get a value shift in the country. So it takes a while. You don't do it overnight. And I think that that's really my approach to it at this point. There are lots of nuances. I keep studying the issues of authoritarianism. They're so difficult with regard to children. So supporting the democratic capacities in each of the countries becomes extremely important if we're going to move forward with child rights.
I think we have the space for one or two more questions. Dimitris, you want to come in? I need a table next time. I think that's the issue that I discovered.
Okay, yes. Well, congratulations to everybody for excellent speeches. Well done. My question is about when we started designing the program in Greece about ECI, there was one main question: how to make the voice of the children, which are the real beneficiaries, especially for the age 4 to 6, to be heard. Because we all know that based on most of the conventions of the children, the convention of the child, the convention of the persons with disabilities, is fundamental right, the voices of the beneficiaries to be heard. And when somebody raised this issue in our internal meetings, to be honest, it was maybe the hardest time on the design of this program. So the question is for Eric, with great experience, I know the field, and of course for Miss Emily. What do you think about the voice of the children to be heard when we design such a program? Because the family is another issue with advantages and disadvantages of the whole thing, but about the voice of the children.
Great question to conclude the session, the voice of children.
He's pushing it to me, so I have to.
She already gave the answer before.
Well, I did, but let me give you an example. A real example of a real policy planning situation. The country is Tunisia. And I talked to them there about children's policy planning capacity. And they said, yes, we think our children could be helpful in planning our national policy for early childhood development. So we did, actually, they led what we call consultation workshops, but this was with children from about the ages of 4 or 5 upward, which is where they can really vocalize their thing. They saw the world, of course, through the eyes that is, their clear eyes without guile. And one of the things that they pointed out, there were many things. A lot of them were just simply reaffirming what the elders already knew. But one of the things they caught on, they said, you know, we have very dirty environments. There is garbage along the roads. It's unsanitary. It's hurting our climate. We have problems that we need to control, such as the chemicals that are in the water. It's now in the national ECD policy of Tunisia. The children's voices made the difference. The older people, the leaders of the country, were saying, oh, we forgot that.
Mhm.
Yes, indeed.
Mhm.
But the children perceived it. A second thing that children see that we don't see is what their little brothers and sisters need. And they will tell you with great concern what their siblings of either younger or older are needing, because they see them suffering, they see difficulties. They can also see the fissures in society that are between families and are within families. So the children have a lot to say, but you need to have the children together and very good facilitators for these focus groups. And they will give you elements that are immensely powerful for purposes of policy planning. Not all countries have the ability to let go and consult children, but they do have to be verbal. So we need children at least, well, 3, you can even see in children's eyes a lot of answers, but that isn't enough. You really need to have them speaking. So I would say 3, 4, or 4, really, I feel better about 4 years of age and older. And to do that would be a good complement to all the other groups that you consult.
Thank you very much. This is the end of this panel. We now will be going to the concluding session, but if we can applaud everyone, please, for this excellent session. And now the concluding session. Concluding remarks.
So may I invite Jim, Evelina, and Manuela to come. We have now reached the end of the conference. We have some closing remarks and of course the thank you. So please stay for a second.
Tim, do you want to sit down?
No, I think we can.
I'm first. Is you ready?
No, I did come out since 3, but
I came out at 2:50.
oh, was it 2:50?
Yeah.
Are we ready for the closing session? Yes. Okay. I know it's a long afternoon, and thank you very much for being with us until the end. Again, my name is Evelina Borisova. I am the Early Childhood Development Regional Advisor for Europe and Central Asia. I had the pleasure to welcome some of you yesterday, along with Jim and Emma, to the reception. And today I'm honored to be delivering closing remarks on behalf of UNICEF, with what seems like a very, very exciting 2 days that we spent together. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed policymakers, government officials, delegations, colleagues, friends, practitioners, parents, because I know many of us are also parents. I am really filled with so much gratitude and excitement and inspiration. I really want to emphasize the inspiration and gratitude because it's so important to have witnessed such incredible gathering and turnout and extremely active participation over the last 2 days on a topic that for UNICEF, it's extremely dear to our hearts. We have been pushing this agenda for a long time with many of you, and to have a conversation where we can successfully use the acronym ECI and know exactly what it means among us in all its nuances and meanings and complexity. It's truly a privilege to be a part of that kind of environment. And I think all of you have made it happen. So it's really an exciting time to be a part of a conversation that we can share and we all understand what it is about. And I think this conversation has been one of those. I think this conference has also demonstrated the importance to go much deeper. As Emily said, it's both inspiring and also sort of disheartening how much work there is in front of us. And at the same time, I think the models that have been shared, the best practices that have already been a part of the discussion, I think pave the way to what is possible. And again, as you will hear from other closing remarks after us, we all believe that this is just the beginning of the next part of the journey that I think we've been walking on together. Allow me to express just a few pieces of gratitude because I think these are very important. First, on behalf of UNICEF, a very strong, heartfelt appreciation to all of the panelists who came sometimes from far away to share expertise, to really bring inspiration to a very important conversation. And more importantly, to really be a part of this dialogue among us today. A very deep appreciation and gratitude to all the government representatives and delegations that also traveled from far away, and more importantly for their commitment, for the political will, for all of the efforts that they're continuing to put nationally in their countries to move this dialogue forward, often in a very complex environment, as we have heard from colleagues from Ukraine. Not only that, but in the context of also changing governments, shifting priorities, and the importance of coordinating between different ministries, which we've also heard very clearly. I must also acknowledge the unwavering support and the dedication of the European Commission, who are a very critical partner and advocate with us in this area, not just for children's rights, but also more importantly, to make sure that inclusion from the start stays at the forefront of policy dialogue at the European Union level. A very special recognition to our dear colleagues from EASPD and Down Syndrome Albania, because I think thanks to our joint efforts, this event came true, and we look forward to much more collaboration after this event as well. Now, I want to just take a moment and a little bit step back and reflect on what we've learned over the last 2 days and where we're trying to go, because I think so much information has flowed in, and I hope everybody has had a chance to digest some of it and to take forward some steps. I always start with what we know very, very clearly. And I think what I hope we all know in this room is just how crucial the early years are. I think this is something that is the baseline in any conversation when we talk about early childhood intervention. It truly is an unparalleled once in a lifetime window of opportunity to change the course of how children's development can continue. And it's even more important in terms of brain development and in terms of how we can create and use the ability that we know the children have to compensate for potential developmental delays that may be taking place in the early years. We know this. We've also have been reminded over the course of the conference that approximately 17% of children face developmental difficulties or risks for developmental delays, and will benefit tremendously from tailored developmental support. We've heard how imperative and how critical it is to develop contemporary systems and models for early childhood intervention, in addition to developmental monitoring that needs to be integrated into the system. We knew all this from the start, but I think what we have learned a great deal over the last 2 days is really what it would take. It goes back to the title. What would it take and how to make it work, how to make early childhood intervention work in every country across the whole region, which I think is the vision. And I think what I'll try to say is condensing it to 5 key elements. I think Emily already mentioned so many of those, but I think it's something to keep remembering how to build these systems of support that really last. First, we must ensure that the right policies are in place for early childhood intervention and that those policies promote a true paradigm shift, a true transformation in how we can support from every single perspective, from health, from education, from social welfare professionals. I think we've had wonderful examples of how this is possible, but policies really remain at the forefront of what our work is about. 2, we must mobilize adequate resources. And I think we've heard this over and over. Policies without financing don't have legs. So we truly need to work hand in hand on the importance of finance and policy to sustain them, to initiate and to reform. 3rd, I think we need to foster a great deal of cross-sectoral collaboration, just like the one we have started in this room, and multiply that in every country, not just at the national level, but also at municipal level as well, where we work to strengthen the capacities of professionals across all of the relevant fields. And I think many of you spoke so much about the importance of training, capacity development, and how crucial it is to really bring that paradigm shift to life. I think this, from our perspective, is one of the key elements of the next set of the agenda as well. 4th, and very importantly, as we have heard, is empowering families, empowering them and supporting them to embrace the role that they play in the whole reform agenda and in the building of these early childhood intervention systems. Of course, if this isn't enough, we've also heard just how critical it is to build these systems with a humanitarian lens in mind, to make sure that they can deliver and be available, that those services are available in emergency situations, as we have heard from the panels this morning as well. And finally, to ensure that all these elements are actually working in a coherent, coordinated, and really synergistic approach to really deliver for all children in a particular environment. Does it sound like a lot? Yes, it is a lot. Indeed, it is a lot. But what we aspire to achieve together is challenging, while at the same time undeniably worthwhile. And I hope that we all share this very important vision. More than that, I think we owe it to our children. We owe it to the citizens of the nations where we represent to know that this is what's most crucial part of the work. I think, as we have heard over the course of the last 2 days, each country is at a different stage of development. The journey is long, and the journey is not one journey. There's many different ways to follow this path towards sustainable and strong early childhood intervention systems. For some countries, the starting point is a situational analysis, and that is enough of an inspiration to begin a reform. For other countries, it's the development of a policy or an act. For other countries, it's modeling an approach that inspires the way that the country can move forward. So all of those entry points are extremely valid, and they would be relevant depending on where your country is and what is the space for reforms. But what's important is that each of these entry points leads towards a very coherent roadmap and a very strategic way to move the agenda forward towards scale up of those services, scale up of capacities, and funding that should be available for these services longer term. We're very, very pleased to witness the support of many partners who are with us today, but very importantly, the European Commission, as we have heard from the last panel, who really bring a lot of momentum in this conversation, and even more of that is needed. And I think more of these types of partnership where we advocate together and we make very concrete asks, not just of donors and funders, but more importantly of governments that we represent and work with, can really bring about the change that we want to see. I think all I can say is that I wish us all every success with this very important journey. UNICEF continues to be a very steadfast and true supporter of this agenda. We're here to support all of you. We're here to continue the reforms that many of you have initiated, to bring the voices that need to come together to amplify the conversation even more at all levels. at the levels of governments, at practitioners and partners on the ground as well, and of course of families, which I think we know is just as important. I really hope that together we can turn our joint aspiration into a reality, and next time we come together, we will have even more best practices to share and more great ideas to bring forward to the table. Thank you very much.
It's about to end. So Jim asked me to speak in Albanian. He would love to hear me talking in Albanian, but do all of you have the headsets? No, I'm sorry, Jim. I will say thank you at the end. So for the third time, I'm saying we are still excited that we are here, and it has been really great. I hope among us, many Albanian professionals or from the parents community were able to get as much as possible. Well, as regards me, Down Syndrome Albania, and if I can say to the situation here in Albania in connection to early childhood intervention or even family-centered based, what we will do is at least what I have done for the last 10 years. And I will ask your help, guys, there to play a video from the COVID time. It was, I think, the first 3-4 days of COVID. We were all isolated here, and if we would go outside, we would get a fee or maybe go to jail. This was the craziness of those first days, and we were trying to support the families. Maybe a full screen. We do support families in need, economically in need as well. So while our therapists were trying to, to use the Zooms and the WhatsApps and whatever to get in touch with the families, there were also a lack of, some toys, simply toys that could be used in those days. And this dad did prepare the toy himself. So he started from what he had in those days. And this is what we have been doing for the last 10 years in Down Syndrome Albania Foundation. We started from... Yeah, you see, this was because we had this group and the staff was sharing this video, and I was really at the same time happy but crying because of the opportunity of the lacking opportunities. Of course, at the first instance, then we sent plenty of helping tools for the program that the therapists were designing for those weeks. But what I was saying is that we started with what I started with my child. I had a child with Down syndrome. I looked for the services. I didn't find the services. And then I thought, okay, maybe I try with the services. And I needed the resources. What I knew was how to, I worked in the business sector in marketing and PR. My community was business, so I started collecting money, doing fundraising campaigns with famous singers, etc. And that's what I did. Then we started reading. I read a lot, and I was distributing that material with my child's kindergarten educators, etc. Then Flavia and Mirella joined as volunteers, and we started reading what's around, and we ran into the early aids, the association on early intervention. And then we joined the first conference, at least that conference that was in Serbia. And I met Eric, and Eric told me about EASPD, and then we became member of EASPD. And everything is like, what is now, what do I have now, and what do I do next? And now we have the manual translated in Albanian thanks to EASPD. So what we are going to do is, seeing this, we have the member forum, and we are very active. Flavia is very active at the member forum on early intervention. And we are just going to use again our community, the community that we feel very proud that we belong to. So in order we try to improve and whatever is there that we can do within the resources. And then we will knock doors, of course. One of them is UNICEF Albania. We have been selected since 2020 for a potential partnership when funding is available. So we hope, now we know that there is a call from European Commission and we know that UNICEF is going to apply there. So if they get that, maybe we will get something as well to do in this regard. So this is what we are going to do. And while with the government, you know, there is one thing, even in Albania, among the NGOs, the disability NGOs or NGOs in general, there are sometimes, you know, we try to protect our personal territories. But I am sure of one thing, and I have seen this, especially in our community, the organizations working for people with disabilities. We have really knocked doors and made the big fights when it has to do about, you know, trying to do a law not correctly or according to the interest of persons with disabilities. So even in this regard, as you heard, we have the law, and there is also the early intervention article, and that's it since 2016. I'm sorry. We will try to push, but things are hard. And this will take time, but for slowly and step by step, and with everyone's help and this amazing network, I hope we will be able also to advance things in Albania in order to support the families and the children of our community. I thank you all very, very much. I look forward to meet you all in Helsinki again. Thank you very much.
Well, we're nearly there. You have shared, you have networked over the last 2 and more days. You are the experts. You are the people who provide services to assist families with young children with disabilities. We can talk all we like in these rooms, here or anywhere else, but it comes back to you. You are the most important people in these rooms, and hopefully we've benefited from the exchange. We've benefited from the tremendous presentations we've all heard and listened to and responded to over the last 2 days. Our detailed thanks will wait for our Chief Executive from EASPD, Tim Gillen. I will focus more on the challenges for us moving forward. Yes, it's no surprise, perhaps, that whilst we understand in this room the concept of early childhood intervention and what that means, that there is still a limited awareness in our circles, in our own countries, in our governmental systems. So there is still a huge task to be carried out there to carry that message across and to win support for the importance of that message. Yes, too, in most of our countries, there is still a lack of access to quality support, and there are gaps in the support that are available. Yes, too, there are inadequate resources in many of our countries. But sometimes it's more about attitudes rather than resources. The government ministry that won't listen or engage, or has very retrospective and medical model approaches to these matters. More broadly, we still have societal barriers in many of our countries. Stigma of a child with disability, the parent who has a newly born child and who's in some ways quite devastated, struggling to come to terms with that new reality, who needs assistance badly and support. And to recognize the value that that child may have brought into the family or brought to the parent. They will only learn that perhaps over time, once the child starts to grow and to develop an individuality and a personality. We do need still a lot more work to train people in the correct value base, the social model of disability, to recognize what proper and meaningful support to parents should and could and should look like. So the challenges exist, but we have heard many, many examples, as I said at the outset of the 2 days, of good practice, good examples in countries that don't necessarily have endless resources or a fully supportive society. So there's lots of positives to take away from these 2 days. And I was reminded too, it's sometimes one does despair about a government ministry that won't listen or won't fund the meaningful things that you want to do. But I was talking to 2 Albanian organizations this afternoon, and I was reminded about something that, with the focus today, the last 2 days has been so much on children, it's almost easy to forget the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Disabled Persons. Please think about that if you are in dialogue with your governments or fighting for resources for your governments. Remember the strong commitments that are made in that convention and the reporting requirements that your